Well, welcome everyone to the second half of How to Have a Stress-Free Holiday with Venerable Robina Courtin. Thank you, Venerable, for coming to Shantideva Center and for teaching us.
Happy, sweetheart. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everybody. Stress-free. It's such a good word, stress, you know. We should add it to the list of afflictions in the Buddhist list, I think. It's a very popular word we have, isn't it? Stress. Well, I mean, you know, we covered really the really key points last week. I mean, you know, about we know that, I mean, you know, that with families, we can see this. So no, sorry, we'll just motivate. Think for this 90 minutes we'll be here together. So we're just going to listen, think about, contemplate the meaning of these words. And that includes me, I promise. So we can take some tools from it to develop our own potential so we can be of benefit to others. That's the essence of it, really. So, I mean, there's so many approaches, you know. I mean, first of all, for example, let's say you've got a difficult relationship with your family. And let's say you're struggling yourself. There's a whole range of approaches, you know. And the key thing is it's according to where you're at. I mean, everything's according to what your capabilities are. It's like anything you learn. Somehow I think we think of spiritual practice as some kind of absolute. That's the same for everybody. But it's like if you're playing tennis, you have to know what you're capable of. You have to know your capability. And if we've not really started a spiritual practice, or we haven't done much kind of becoming aware of what we're thinking and feeling, which is not necessarily common in our culture. We do know what we're thinking and feeling, but usually when it's too late, you know, and this is one of the big things. We only notice our feelings when they're so extreme, and then we're ready to either kill somebody or go to a therapist or kill ourselves, you know. But the key thing about Buddhist approach is to learn very consciously the skill to notice your mind. I mean, it almost seems so silly. It almost seems so evident. Well, of course we notice our mind. Well, we don't, you know, and we've got to look at this. And so why don't we? Look at why we don't. Or we do look at our mind, but when it's really roaring emotion, because you can't avoid it, but that's way too late. I always use the simple analogy. It's like you've never heard of car mechanics. You've just never heard of it. And so you have a lovely brand new car and you drive it and drive it and drive it until one day, 100 miles an hour on the freeway and the wheels are falling off. And you go, oh, my wheels are falling off. Well, that's what we're like with our emotions, because it's just not part of our culture. It really isn't part of our culture to have skills that you use to develop awareness of what is happening in your mind before the wheels fall off. We only notice when the wheels fall off. And that's even the way it is with our systems of therapy. I mean, if you're feeling quite content in your relationship and everything's going very nicely and the kids are behaving well and everyone's fairly happy, and you decide you might go to a therapist, well, the therapist will say, what's your problem? What are you coming to see me for? In other words, really, I think in our culture, the attitude is you only go to the therapist when your wheels are falling off. And that's just really rather bizarre. I mean, we know perfectly well, using the example of car mechanics, that we have maintenance. We have really good systems of maintenance. We have that for everything, for our bodies, for our teeth, for our houses, electricity, for cars. You don't wait till things collapse before you do something about it. But it's very fascinating. That's what we're like with our minds, if you really look at it carefully. No wonder we have such traumatic, terrible problems. No wonder people kill each other. No wonder people go mad, because we leave it until it's way too late. This is a really major point, you know. I mean, in fact, the very time to go to the therapist is to get skills to maintain yourself. That's exactly the Buddha's approach. Even if you don't even talk about achieving nirvana and becoming Buddha, which is the long term. But even if you just look at it from the point of view of the Buddhist approach being this practical, you know, attitude that gives you, well, this practical approach that gives you skills to become conscious, to be aware of what the hell is going on in your mind before it becomes emotional. And it's not easy because we don't particularly want to look into the mind. When everything's going nicely, the job is good and the husband's behaving well and the kids are behaving well, you don't want to bother looking at your mind. There's no reason to, we think. But this is the point. you do not wait until your wheels fall off before you go to the mechanic. And that's exactly what we have to start to change. Then you could really argue that if you're taking these skills and really working hard on your mind every day using the Buddhist approach, you could argue that you will never completely lose the plot, because you're able to deal with the various conceptual stories that inform your emotions, but you're working on them at the level before they become emotional, and then you can adjust them because it's reasonable. It's just like your car. If you're going at 5 miles an hour, you can handle what's going on. But if you're going 100 miles an hour and you've never been to a mechanic, there's nothing much you can do when the wheels fall off except damage control. So it's really so practical, this Buddhist approach. And you don't wait till things are serious. It's just astonishingly ignorant, you know. But that means we have to understand. I mean, you know, we tend to think in our culture, therapy is only for those who've got problems, and we just assume everybody else is normal. And the norm is you get up in the morning, you're busy, you've got a job, you have your husband, you have your kids, and that's normal. But the Buddha's view, you know, it's much more radical, actually. I often say, and it sounds really extreme, that we're all mentally ill. It's just a question of degree. And that really is a very accurate statement using Buddha's approach. And that means, to the extent that you have any attachment, aversion, irritation, upset, frustration, depression, anxiety, worries, fears, you name it, to whatever degree. I mean, this is where Buddha's quite radical, because he is suggesting he's got methods where we can completely get rid of all this stuff. So his view of normal is practically what a Buddha is, you know. We're all abnormal, we're all mentally ill, we're all deluded to one degree or another. And all Buddhism is a series of methods at the most basic level. It's a series of methods to really work, to know how to become familiar with what's in your mind, to know how to navigate it, and to know then how to radically change your mind. That's the job. But it's the most hard job we'll ever do, because there are various things, stopping us from doing it. I mean, the major one, and this is our philosophical view in the world, that the outside world, the husband, the children, the job, the traffic, the government, the politics, that they are the main source of how I feel. So we always work on the outside. That's what we're used to from the time we wake up in the morning until the time we go to sleep at night. Look what we're preoccupied with, the outside world, isn't it? It's really clear. But the Buddha says this is like walking around like with half a person. You've got to know how to navigate the inside world, because that is the main source of how you deal with your life. And it's very simple what Buddha's saying. It's not punitive, it sounds it to us. But the husband isn't the main cause. The traffic isn't the main cause. Your body even isn't the main cause of what goes on in your mind. It's the other way around. So the job is to know our mind intimately. But like we've been talking, the Buddhist level of practice, before you even get anywhere near working on your mind, it's very skillful. We don't think like this in our culture, is you work on your body and speech first. And this is what we were discussing last week. So if you're not that good at controlling your mind, and you've got to go into a family environment and you're really dreading it, well, you're going to have problems, you know. So you've got to have some confidence that at least you can begin to control your speech. This is one of the most important. I mean, it seems so silly almost in our culture, because we tend to think, well, I can say what I like. We don't think it matters. We don't think speech matters. But of course, when we have the Buddhist view of karma, which is that every millisecond of what you think or do or say leaves a seed in your mind. Every moment of it is you programming yourself, turning yourself into the person you become. So clearly, if that's true, who wants to be turning ourselves into an angry, upset, frustrated, deluded person? Nobody. So then the very first level is you check if you really don't feel you are capable of handling that group at work, that family environment, well, then you make the wise choice not to go. But of course, what stops us from doing that is another neurotic state of mind called guilt and fear of being criticized. But we've got to have some courage, We have to know our own mind. We have to know our own capabilities. It's like if you're offered a chance to play tennis with Roger Federer and you've never, you've hardly played tennis before, I'd suggest it might be fun, but you get smashed to pieces. So if you can't handle it, you have to know your capability. This is really incredibly important. And most of the time, we don't know our capability. We don't know what we're capable of, because we don't have confidence in ourselves. So the very first level of practice is to at least control your speech. You decide you're going to go, who's going to be at the party, all the danger areas, the people you can't cope with, the ones who don't like you, but you decide, okay, I'll go and I'll shut my mouth and not say negative words. I mean, this already is a transformation. If you're going to have confidence to do that, then you just sort of, and then the other attitude, like I said this last week, and it's really quite profound. If you can have enough courage just to decide you're going there for the sake of other people. Act like a bodhisattva instead of this feeling of I've got to have a saying and no one listens to me and I want people to believe, I want to speak about what I believe. You forget that. You just decide you're there for other people and just enjoy and serve other people. How are you, uncle? How are you, auntie? Give them a cup of tea and leave yourself at the door. This is, I tell you, if you can make a decision to do this, you'll have a very nice time and everyone will love your company because you're such a friendly, nice person. But at least control the speech. This is so profound, I tell you. And this is one of the ones where we feel so depressed every day because we know our speech is uncontrolled. And it takes time. I mean, if we spend our lives just vomiting out whatever we feel, you can still be quite, it's really difficult to have that amount of awareness, not so much even awareness of your mind, but awareness to control this one. It's really huge, I tell you, and you'll be delighted if you can do it. So then let's look at the word stressor. Let's look at what that is. I mean, we love that word. It's a favorite word. We have that word. But stress really is the beginning of the arising of aversion. And aversion is the bare bones state of mind that's behind anger. It's very simple, actually. You see, attachment is there all the time. Now, if attachment's getting what it wants, if everything's going lovely, if your attachment's getting what it wants, if the sun is shiny and the hubby is friendly and the kids are behaving and the traffic's not too bad and people smile at you, nothing wrong with this. It's wonderful to have everything to go nicely. But what that means is your attachment's getting what it wants. So it's easy to be friendly and easygoing. Now, the stress begins when the attachment stops getting what it wants. The traffic suddenly becomes heavy. The husband starts becoming argumentative. The noise suddenly becomes loud. Then suddenly your attachment is getting stretched. And then aversion is beginning to arise because aversion, which is the bare bone state of mind behind anger, is the response when attachment stops getting what it wants. And this, of course, is 1,000 times a day. The tiniest thing can happen that can arise the aversion. And this is the point why the stress builds up. If you don't deal with it at that second, then it will build up, won't it? And by the end of the day, you wonder why you're exhausted and you wonder why you want to kill somebody, because we don't deal with these mini moments. This is a really profound point as well. Again, it's like, if you're really becoming conscious of your car and you're listening for the wobbles, you're listening for the mechanical strange things, you're all the time conscious of what's happening in the car. And then when the small noise comes, there's a danger sign, so you can go off to the mechanic. But you don't wait till the wheels to fall off. You don't wait till the whole car to wobble. That's too late. You deal with the little things one step at a time. This is so simple, but really quite profound. Why things build up is because you don't deal with each problem. So what does that mean? What does it mean, deal with it? Well, you're doing the dishes and you call one of the kids and they don't come. Just something as tiny as that, and you already feel the annoyance coming. You feel it rising, don't you? The annoyance. Annoyance is a polite word for anger. Aversion, annoyed, upset, frustrated, irritated. They're polite words for anger when anger's strong. They're mild anger. You really have to understand this. But we take these for granted in our culture. Oh, I'm so frustrated. I'm so fed up. I'm so annoyed. I'm irritated. You would never say you're being angry, but they're mild anger. And then if you can catch that, like you notice your mind, the kid doesn't come, and you notice yourself cursing inside, getting irritated. So what do you do with that? You deal with it. You say to yourself, give it a break, Robina. Give it a break. Relax, girl. Relax. So you argue with the aversion and you calm it down. But if you don't argue with it and you don't calm it down, it'll pass in a minute, but it's building up. And then the next event happens and then more aversion. And by the end of the day, you wonder why you're screaming. This is so logical, but it's almost surprising to us because it's so simple. Because we don't deal with, we allow the aversion to fester. And then another moment of aversion adds on top. And then another one until the stress is unbearable. Stress is when two things force against each other, isn't it? Well, stress is the moment when attachment doesn't get what it wants and aversion arises. But if you deal with it and let go of it, that second, you're driving the car and suddenly the red light stops you in your tracks. You get annoyed. That second you catch it, give it a break, Robina. Relax. It's just a red light. So you argue with it, and that calms the aversion down. But if it's raging, screaming anger, it's too late. You can't do much with it. That's the wheels falling off. This is such profound advice, but it's almost embarrassingly simple, you know. You see, Buddha's really a cognitive therapist. There's this, I remember reading recently in The Economist, there was an obituary. The fellow, I can't think of his name now, who established cognitive behavioral therapy. It's so clear it comes from Buddhism, you know. And this is often what we don't think about Buddhist psychology being like this. Buddhist psychology, if you're applying it properly, isn't just being mindful. There's this cliched view that being mindful is Buddhist. That's what most people think, but it's so cliched. Yes, mindfulness is one of the many qualities we need to cultivate, which is the ability to catch what you're thinking and bring it back on track. But it's the real benefit of it, using this and concentration and all the other parts of our mind, is to be noticing what's happening moment by moment in the mind. But just not noticing is not enough. You've got to be able to label what is happening in your mind. It's exactly like being a botanist. If you're a gardener, you have to have some semblance of understanding of what a weed is and what a flower is. Because what gardening is by definition is distinguishing between the weeds and pulling them out and then identifying the flowers and leaving them and nourishing them. That's what you've got to do with your mind every second. Because any millisecond of the day, you've either got to be having a delusion or a virtue arising in your mind. There's only two options. One will be a virtuous state of mind and one will be a non-virtuous state of mind. That's it. Buddha's got this very clear packaging of all the states of mind. But this is very sophisticated level of practice when you can be conscious, because there's like 1,000 thoughts a second. But to begin to develop this awareness while you're doing the dishes, while you're driving the car, that's why you've got to have some meditation in the morning where you give yourself some space. You might do your breathing meditation. You might do your 9-round breathing meditation. You might do something to help you give a bit of space. And then you make a decision, okay, I'm going to watch my mind like a hawk throughout the day. And that's just going to be happening. It has to happen every second. But when we're so busily involved in the dishes and the traffic and the kids and the husband and the job, you've got no space left over to notice your mind. That's the danger time. So with skill, every day we get better and better and better at just naturally noticing the thoughts while you're doing other things and adjusting them. You're driving the car and you can feel the anxiety arise, you know, which is attachment not getting what it wants. So you calm it down. Relax, Robina. It's okay, girl. But the quicker you catch it, the more easy it is to fix it. The longer you leave it, the more difficult it is to fix it. This is really obvious with everything. So the quicker you catch your thoughts and you identify, that's aversion, Robina. Give it a break, babe. Just give yourself a break. Relax. Then you will be able to handle what's going on. But when you leave them all and they build up, stress built upon stress, built upon stress, then there'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back, you know. But that's the way we live our lives, because we don't have skills to learn to be conscious of what we're thinking and know what to do with it. This seems like radical new idea to us, but that's really what cognitive therapy is. This clever fellow invented this system, this method, you know, by you notice the thoughts, you don't just notice them, you then change them. We can mold our mind into any shape we'd like, as Lama Zopa says, which means your thoughts, because we live at the level of thoughts. We live at the level of conceptuality. That's it. But the conceptuality, which is deeper down, all these thousands of thoughts, when they're strong, that's when the emotional component that's when the body starts to feel it. And that's the only time we tend to notice, because we're so addicted to our bodies, we only notice what's happening when the body feels it. That's the wheels falling off. And that's way too late. I mean, this is a really sophisticated job. As we progress, we get better and better and better at this, to a degree of incredible subtlety. We've got to start somewhere. That's why at least control the servant of the mind, your speech. This is profound. This is huge. When it's building up inside and you're about to explode, it's almost impossible then. So we've got to get better and better at catching our thoughts. That's all, noticing them, but not just noticing them. You don't just go, oh, there's anger. You don't just go, oh, there's a weed and keep walking. You've got to do something about it. Pull the damn thing out. You see a flower, you nourish it. So you see virtue in your mind, or this is something interesting too, because unfortunately the default mode of ego is negativity. The voices of ego are negativity. And we mainly, like I joke and I say, I've never met a person yet who says, Robina, I can't stop thinking good thoughts. We're not like that because we're not practiced. When you're a bodhisattva, yes. But right now we hear the negative ones, if we do start to look, and they loom large, don't they? But the trouble is we often too make them bigger than they are. And then we tend to think we're rather passive, that we've got to wait for thoughts to come before we do something. But we can also, I mean, it sounds like hilarious, but it's so obvious. We can decide to think certain things. I mean, we're not just babies being pulled from pillar to post, like a puppet on a string. We can learn to not just control our negative thoughts and harness them and argue with them, but we can proactively cultivate having positive thoughts, saying positive thoughts. This sounds hilarious to us because we really treat our mind like we're we just got no control over it. We can just be pulled by it. But we're allowed to think whatever we want. We can control our mind. We can develop thoughts. We do that when we learn anything. You learn to play music, you're cultivating so many new thoughts, or thoughts about musical theory. Well, you can have positive thoughts and loving thoughts and kind thoughts and wise thoughts and generous thoughts. You can decide to have them. This almost seems like a surprise to us because we tend to be passive about our thoughts, only controlling the negative ones. No, we can proactively have positive ones. So the first one is you argue with the negative ones, and what argues with the negative ones is your positive thoughts. And they've got to be kind. You hear anger arising in your own mind. You don't beat yourself up. Come on, Robina, give yourself a break, girl. Leave it. And like I said, the sooner you get it, then you have a positive thought. It's okay, or it's just karma, or it's just the kid, or it's all right. You be like a wise friend inside your own head. And then you can have just positive thoughts. You can, instead of, you're reading something about somebody and you find yourself criticizing. Just shut up, Robina, stop criticizing and rejoice for somebody else. Let's say, you say positive thoughts. I mean, this sounds almost like being like Pollyanna, but what the hell do you think we're trying to do with our mind? We're trying to program our mind into the mind of a happy, wise, compassionate person. How do you do that? By having positive thoughts and by arguing with the negative ones. This is the job of being a Buddhist every day. So again, like I said, if you're going to be in a difficult situation where you're being bombarded by 47 people and you're something you can't handle and all the intensity of families, then you've got to be wise, don't do what you feel you're not capable of, This is the one about guilt. This is a big one that drives us. Because we're the deepest attachment we all have, and this is very subtle. It's hard to see this one. The deepest attachment we have is to being seen as a good girl. We're craving to be approved of. We're craving every second to be liked. So part of us in our ordinary life, walking down the street, in the cafe, with the family, every second, there's this neediness in us, this thought. These are thoughts, but they're so subtle. We're constantly watching the outside. We're constantly assessing what other people are doing when they look at us. You're like in a restaurant and you start to speak a bit loud. You look around to see who's looking at you to criticize. You're even driving the car and a car gets behind you, gets too close. You don't even know this person, but it's a stranger showing that they're annoyed with you. We get upset. We can't stand anybody having negative thoughts about us because we have the deepest attachment that is craving to be liked, to be approved of. So we know ourselves, if you're with other people and you say something and someone laughs at, delights at it, and you all laugh, you feel good. Oh, someone approves of me. As soon as a person, let's say you say something, but no one responds, you have a panic attack. Oh, no one approves of me. This is underneath us all the time. This is so profound, this one, attachment to reputation, they call it. And it's because attachment is the deepest to ego grasping. It's the deepest delusion, the closest to ego grasping, the very sense of a separate self. So this is the hardest one. So when, let's say there's a family gathering and you just know you can't handle it, but we'll be afraid of not going because we don't want to be criticized. So we have to really decide what we can handle, and then out of courage and with a good motivation, not out of an angry motivation, decide, I'm sorry, darlings, I can't come tonight. I'm feeling out of it, whatever you want to say. You don't have to blurt out, I can't handle you all, but you accept that you might get criticized. This is becoming very courageous. If we can do this, we can get some wisdom and we can follow our own thoughts, follow our own wisdom, not being pulled from pillar to post by what we think other people expect us to do. This is a major one, actually. This is a major cause of so much of our suffering in daily life throughout our lives. It's the one that drives most human beings, but it's hard to see it. I always quote this story I read about a woman, an Australian nurse in England, who wrote a book about she worked with the dying. The 5 greatest regrets of the dying. And the greatest regret was throughout their life, I didn't follow what I really wanted to do. I didn't follow my heart, but I always did what I thought was expected of me. That's this particular attachment, this feeling that we've got to make, it seems often very good. It seems like, especially if you're one of the nice girls, if you're one of the good girls, mummy's helper, this craving to be seen, this attachment to being seen as a good girl really pollutes your kindness. You are being kind, you are mummy's helper, but your attachment is to being seen as a good girl, but it's hard to see it. And that's why you end up getting misused and treated like a doormat, because you're always trying to please everybody because you want to be approved of. It's very deep in all of us, but it's hard to see it. And we mix it with the virtuous states of mind. So even a simple example like this, if you feel it's that you can't handle this evening, you just know it's not the right for you, you're too fragile or whatever you like, you decide not to go, but with a good motivation, and then allow people to think what they like. This is scary to us. And it's so instinctive to always try to do what we think pleases other people. It sounds virtuous, but it's very tricky. We've got to really see our minds. And this doesn't happen immediately. We've got to unpack and look at our minds very carefully. And it's a very painful habit to change. This is so primordial. I mean, this isn't when you learn about the 8 worldly dharmas, isn't it? This is this weird phrase, and you learn about this in the Bodhisattva path. It's just a way of presenting attachment at really primordial levels. And this is what drives most of our decisions in our daily lives. That's why we suffer so terribly. And that's why we get so confused. And most of us have no idea what we really want to do, because we're always worried about what other people expect of us. So it takes this big change, a lot of inner work, to start to even ask the question, what do I really want? Because we're scared it sounds selfish, but you have to know what you want. Then you decide if it's valid or not, if it's beneficial or not. But you've got to know. But we don't even know most of the time because we're always worried about what people think. So no wonder we're completely confused, And especially with families. I mean, families are like tyrannies, they can be tyrannies. Especially, in our culture, it's not so strong anymore, because so much break up of families. But in some cultures where family still runs the show, I remember in one particular country, it doesn't matter which country, where still family is very powerful. And this one woman talking about what she wanted to do. And it was clear she was driven by what her mother and father expected of her. And that was what's meant to be called duty, you know? And it was clear it wasn't the right thing for her. And I suggested that perhaps she should leave home. Well, it was like suggesting she murder her mother. It was so shocking. It was not a possibility for even her to consider that, because that's how strong the tyranny of family is. But we call it duty, you know? Now, if you can be that kind of person who really sacrifices their own life and does whatever your mother and father want, but with a happy mind, that's amazing. But mostly we go mad, you know, we go completely crazy and then get resentful and bitter and angry and blame the parents. So to have the courage, you know, to even, it's like like many people who study go off to university or something because their parents want them to, and they sit there miserable studying what they think their parents want them to do, and they might discover the 4th year in, and to have the courage to stop that can cause a family to reject their child completely. I mean, that's terrifying. We can see this now as, I mean, you know, there are people, for example, let's say when children announce that they're gay. Apparently, the number of families who throw their kids out, kids become homeless. I didn't know that. There's an organization here in Santa Fe that somebody I know runs. It's housing for children who've been thrown out by their parents because they said they're gay, you know, specifically, just that alone. But I mean, imagine when your parents got a really strict views, and then, I mean, the tyranny of it's so difficult. So to be able to navigate that, at the same time to love your mother and father, but to do what you want to do, that's pretty powerful. So how fortunate to have mothers and fathers who say, whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. That's pretty amazing. But we can see this is where the attachment to being seen to be a good girl drives so much of what we do. And it goes to really subtle levels. And it's the subtlest attachment. Attachment to sex and drugs and rock and roll is easy to identify. This is the toughest one. I mean, if you think about the Buddha, we love all the nice stories from 2,500 years ago. It sounds lovely. But if you think about there was a pretty powerful example. His father consciously spent all his time protecting his son from seeing the outside world. And when he was 29 or whatever it was, or maybe younger, I forget now, he decided he'd leave. I mean, that's, you know, talk about responsibility and talk about in that culture. There he was going to become the king of an entire area, and he gives it up, runs away, and becomes homeless. I mean, that takes courage. That's unbelievable. Unbelievably powerful. So we really, one of the things I'm also talking about here then, we just should know, what do I want? I mean, you know, we're too scared to even think that, because what happens is this, you know, what happens is this. Well, what do you want? The first thing we think of, we might know what we want, but the first thing we say is, but it's not possible. No, not possible. Mum wouldn't approve. Dad wouldn't approve. I haven't got the money. We don't even allow ourselves the space to actually say, that is what I want to do. Even if it's like, you know, let's say you're a busy person with 5 children and a life and a job, and, you know, you're becoming a Buddhist, and then someone says, oh, you know, this is amazing initiation the Dalai Lama is going to give in India next week. Would you like to come away with me for 5 days? The first thing you'll say is, oh, no, not possible. No, not possible. Because you're thinking immediately, husband won't approve, children won't approve, haven't got the money, not possible. We don't even give ourselves the space to even dare to say, I want that. I would like that. We feel it's selfish. So we cut ourselves off straight away and say, no, not possible, not possible. No, I can't do that, can't do that. So this is a profound point, actually. I mean, the thing is, you might discover that it is not possible, but don't just cut yourself off first. Maybe the first answer would be, what a wonderful idea. Now, once you open yourself to it, you will then say, now let's look at the possibility. And maybe it's just not possible, but you don't say it first. But we do that, and we cut ourselves off 90% of the time, and we stay stuck in our ways, you know, because we're following fear and attachment to reputation. This is why it's so interesting. I say this to many people. You'll see it's familiar. We often don't know what we want. And that's okay. You don't have to know everything. But what do you do with that? Well, have the courage, as His Holiness says, always aspire to do what is most beneficial. And if you can, long-term, better than short-term. Now, the first thing we say is, oh, but I don't know what I want. So how can I do what's most beneficial? But that's not what he's saying. When we understand karma, that every thought counts. And when we understand motivation is powerful, if our motivation, if that's pure, if that's like so every day you would say, and many of you have heard me say this, and I say it to people when you write to me, and I say this, and this can change everything if you understand it. You wake up in the morning, let's say you're deciding to leave your job, leave the family, do this, you're not sure, you feel some change is coming, you're very scared about it, and you don't know what decision to make. Even if it just means changing jobs, we don't know. We're not clairvoyant. We can't say always perfectly what's the right thing. So what do? You get up in the morning and you, in your practice, and you say, may I do what's most beneficial. I want to do what is most beneficial. So what that means is that thought, as Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. That thought, that aspiration, that motivation, it kind of, what it does, if you say it every day, it nourishes the karmic seeds you've already planted in the past that will manifest eventually, will ripen, nourished by that motivation, will one day ripen and will be the thing that is most beneficial. That's how it works. So you just get up in the morning, you don't know whether you should, leave your husband or not. I don't know what's best, but may I do what's most beneficial? And you just live your life. Hello, darling, how are you? You make the breakfast and you leave it alone. You don't chew it like a dog with a bone. May I do what's most beneficial? And then that nourishes the karmic seeds. And then one day it'll become evident. Almost the choice will make itself, I promise. But instead of panicking and worrying what people think, and I don't know what to do, we often go crazy around this kind of thing. So we just become paralyzed, or we make the wrong choices. We follow attachment, then we get lost. I always love the saying that we pave the way. Every day you are paving the way. Everything you do today properly. You live your life properly. You go to the job, you take care of the children. With that motivation underneath, may I always do what is most beneficial. And that will lead you in the right direction. And then one day the choice will be evident and you will take it and you will make the tough choices. You'll be able to. This is very profound, I tell you. And then you don't get lost. It's sort of like, I always use the example, you're walking on a road and it's your road. You created it. This is your road, baby. It's your life. You created this life, and whatever obstacles you meet on that road, you created those obstacles. So you got to just do the best you can. And you can't just take any old turn off that looks cute, which is what we do. We follow attachment all the time, and then we get lost. But you don't know where the turn off is, so you just keep walking. You get up every morning, may I do what's most beneficial. May I do what's most beneficial. And that makes you courageous. And then you will recognize the turn off when it comes. And it might be the most difficult choice, but you will make it because it's the most beneficial, long-term, better than short-term. Then you will not get lost in your life, I promise. You will speed to enlightenment. And the thing that holds us back is fear of being wrong, fear of being criticized, fear of upsetting people. That paralyzes us, completely paralyzes. And this is how most people live their lives. We don't even know what we want, and yet then we try to pretend to be a nice person. We leap ahead of ourselves, So it's a very interesting point. Anyway, come on, talk to me now. Ask me some questions, people. I've been chatting away for quite a bit.
Venerable?
Yeah, good. Sunny.
I have a question. A lot of what you're saying is, I understand it because from the Western point of view, as you said, cognitive therapy. What it really is very helpful is when you connect, for example, the 5 regrets of the dying, and you can connect that to the principles of the 8 of the worldly dharmas that we're attracted to, because and so I was wondering. So when you're talking about you have a problem. You want your child to help with the dishes, then you feel the aversion, and then you start arguing with yourself. That's the way to deal with it. Would that be lojong?
Darling, no, I mean, lojong technically is a word that's referring to the more advanced level in the bodhisattva path of how to deal with your thoughts. Meaning, lojong is the whole approach of one of the practices in that area of practice, which is necessarily when we're more advanced, is you greet the problems with a happy mind. So yeah, if you're at that level and someone doesn't do what you want and you can listen to it, you go, great, I'm so glad that happened. It's showing me my anger. That's transforming problems. If you can do that, it's up to it's up to what we're capable of, darling. So lojong in general is literally meaning mind training. And it's a broad term for this whole level of practice at the bodhisattva level, where you're much more courageous, you're much more wise, you've done a lot of the earlier work, you're very familiar with your delusions, you've controlled your body and speech, you're living in your vows, and you greet problems with a happy mind. That's that level of practice. That's pretty profound. So if you're capable, absolutely.
But what would it be when you have something and as it's so useful what you're saying, you argue with yourself. You say, wait a second. Okay,
no, this
Sonny.
is different. No, Sonny, there's different things here. It's all a question of levels of capability. The very first level of capability is shut the mouth. The next one, which is like high school, the middle scope of practice, is where you start to become familiar with your delusions and distinguish them from your virtues. That's where you have to work with yourself and argue with it slowly. By the time you get to the bodhisattva path, and it's really quite advanced, you're so together that you are happy to greet a problem. Someone insults you and you eat it for breakfast, and it's immediate practice. So that's advanced. That shows you've done a lot of inner work in the past. Are you understanding my point? So it's all a question of what you're capable of, Sonny.
Okay, so in Buddhist practice, that middle school, the middle is, what's it called? If it's not lojong, that common
is okay. It's called being a Buddhist. It's called working on your mind. It's called controlling attachment, controlling anger, controlling jealousy. That's what it's called.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, that's and I use all these colloquial terms, but really that's when you begin to become a Buddhist. Everybody all cultures have the practice of being disciplined and not killing and not stealing. That's junior school, entry level, first scope practice. Abide by the laws of karma. That's common to the world. Then when you've controlled your body and speech to some degree, now you've got the ability to see your mind. This is where Lama Yeshe puts it, being your own therapist. This is where you start to actually apply the Buddhist approach of recognizing your attachment, recognizing the anger, recognizing the low self-esteem, recognizing the jealousy, catching the thoughts and using your virtuous thoughts inside your own head to argue with them. This is pretty intense because we're not familiar with this yet. It's a real struggle. Now, by the time you're really accomplished in this first levels of practice, you've really disciplined, you're effortlessly controlling your body and speech, you've got some renunciation, you're really subdued. Now you can do the more radical level of greeting the problem with a happy mind. There's no argument. You just happily take the shit. You happily take the insult. You're so controlled. But of course, we all can try at whatever level, but we've got to know the levels of practice. And they're quite specific, darling. Do you understand me, Sonny?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Lou.
I'm going to Boston this Thursday for 4 days for my mother's 95th birthday.
Oh my God, your darling mum. Wow.
Yeah. And she's a very devout Catholic.
Okay.
And I don't want to throw my Buddhism in her face.
Absolutely not.
So I was wondering, can I do like water bowl practices in my head?
Yep.
And read my prayers instead of
That's
reciting
right.
them out
Exactly.
loud and stuff like that?
Yep. But I think, does she know you're a Buddhist, or she doesn't
Yes.
know?
I mean, she knows, but
Well, she does know. Well,
it's one thing to actually see it.
Yeah, I know. But I tell you what, Lou, the way to be is just the real proof of practice is the way you behave. So your mum, I don't know what she's probably nervous. She doesn't know what Lou's thinking. She's maybe thinking you're going to do weird things, you know. So all you got to do is totally surprise her by being loving and kind. Don't even talk about it. She might ask a question. And, you know, most of the time family might out of respect ask a question, but they don't really want to know the answer. So you just crack a joke, you know, but you behave beautifully. You're kind to your mother. You look after her. You love her. You thank her for her kindness. You behave well with all the other family, and they'll all go away. Wow, look at Lou. Whatever Buddhism is, it must be okay. You don't talk about it, Lou. Maybe one of your siblings or one you really just might know. They really do want to know, but you have a private conversation. You do not talk about it in public. You crack a joke if they ask a question. I mean, my family, I've been a Buddhist now for 45 years. And I've got 6 siblings and we're really close friends, but we know the danger areas. They're not interested in boring old Buddhism. Maybe one time, one of my sisters, her tongue was a bit loose because she had too much wine and she started asking me questions. She didn't want to know. I cracked jokes and changed the subject. I probably have had a few, in different ways I have conversations, but it mightn't be overt. But the proof of the pudding is in how you behave, Lou, and have no interest in telling them anything. I mean, don't, because people don't know what you're talking about. They might be sarcastic. It becomes a weird thing. Just be normal, Lou, and keep it totally inside yourself. Totally secret.
Thank you very much, Venerable Robina.
That makes sense, doesn't it, Lou?
Yes, it does.
Especially for your darling mother. You know, she's 95. That's somebody. She goes to mass still, or she doesn't go to mass?
She doesn't go to mass, but she's pretty active, you know.
That's amazing, your darling mum. So you can talk about that with her. You can ask her questions about it, how everything, and talk about God and how God loves her. Say these kind of things, you know. I mean, of course, do you think she's prepared for death? Is she aware of all that, and she's looking forward to go to heaven, or what? Does she discuss all that?
I think she's prepared for death, but because she's that kind of a person that takes everything in stride, you know.
Okay, I understand. Well, I mean, you can talk to her. You can say God. You can talk about, you know, God loves you, Mum, and talk about things that will be surprising to her. Because I mean, she doesn't know what to expect about being a Buddhist. You know, she probably loves Lou, and she's just not sure. So surprise her by being loving and kind and easygoing. That's it. I tell you.
Thank you very much.
And if she does ask things, we'll say it's really this. It's many ways the same. It's all about love and compassion.
Yeah.
You know, just tell her easygoing things.
That's my standard line, love and compassion.
That's it. Exactly, Lou. That's exactly right. Perfect. Who else, darlings? Who else would like to ask a question? Or say something to me? Anybody else? Huh? Nobody? Yes, Sheila, you something. Yes, darling.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I'm still trying to contemplate this idea that we are greeting our problems with a happy mind. Does that mean when bad things happen and someone's yelling at you, whatever it is, that you see it as an opportunity for your response?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right, Arlene. I mean, you know, all these levels of practice, we can try them, but they say, for example, the transforming problem level of practice, as Pabonka Rinpoche says, you need to be a suitable vessel to actually accomplish this level of practice.
Yes,
and what that means, in other words, if you let's say there's a person who abuses you, simply just abuses you in the street, even just a stranger, the first instinct, if we're not very well practiced, we get hurt, we get upset, we shout back, and then we carry it all day. So if we're relatively well practiced, we understand karma, we're really working on our mind, the really profound view, if you're really practicing transforming problems, you'll actually be glad. That's what bodhisattvas are like. They are glad when something bad happens, because it's a bit like, for me, it's a bit like, I always think of like, if you're a sportsman, you like the challenges. You know, if you're a cyclist, you want the tough choices to go uphill. You don't want to go downhill. You greet the problems. If you're at the gym, you greet the pain. If you're you know, you understand, that's the attitude. And that's a really profound level of practice. Sometimes we don't have a choice. Like my friends in prison don't have the luxury to leave, and there they are, innocent, being treated like an animal. They're really forced to transform problems. So it's a very powerful one when you don't have a choice. But that's really what it is. And when you really are a suitable vessel, what that means is you've accomplished the first levels of practice. You've got incredible discipline. You really controlled your mind. You've got renunciation. Most of us haven't. That's a suitable vessel. So the bodhisattvas that's their whole level of practice.
Yes.
They greet the problems with a happy mind. And that's kind of advanced. We can try it. Of course we can, because sometimes we don't have a choice. And it's very
Yes.
profound, because you're purifying bucket loads of rubbish, because you're suddenly, like, there's always that story about Atisha back in the 10th century, you know. He had a cook who was rude and aggressive, and people always said, God, why do you keep that cook? He said, how would I know if I had anger if I didn't have him? So this is always with families, if we're brave enough, when you know that every time anger arises in your mind, and then you accept, you know, and you accept the criticism, you just put an atomic bomb under anger. So it's a really great way to practice, but you need to know what you can handle, Eileen. We need to know what we're capable of, darling.
Yes. Yes.
Understand?
Yes. Thank you.
I mean, often we will confuse it with being a martyr. And that's
Right.
mixed
Yes.
with and that's a real danger area. That's when a lot of people who are very seemingly patient and sweet and mummy's helper, and they become a doormat. That is not what's being said. It's a very profound level of practice that implies a lot of inner work already.
Yes.
A
Yes.
suitable vessel. You understand?
I do. Thank you.
Yeah, good
Thank you.
Eileen.
Thank you.
Hello, Karen. Yes. Yes, Karen. Unmute yourself, darling. I can't hear you.
I don't understand the parable about the cook.
Oh, okay. The very first, there's levels of practice. First level, entry level, junior school, control your speech. Don't blurt out every dumb thing you feel. At least you stop harming other people, but you stop harming yourself as well. You get that, right?
Yeah.
Next level of practice, now you've got space to look at your mind, and you start to see the anger and see the attachment, and you grab them before they get too strong, and you argue with them and you calm them down. That's the next level of practice. So when you're so good at all that, you've really got it down, and you, let's say at the bodhisattva level, then you will greet a problem. So you'd rather be, if you're a bodhisattva, you'd rather be, it sounds weird, you'd rather be in a relationship with a person who's mean to you, because every second they're mean to you, it's attacking your delusions, and your whole wish is to get rid of your delusions. So if you're trying to lose weight, honey child, you love the gym, you love the sweating and the puffing and the panting, because you know you're forcing against your comfort zone, and it's helping you get more powerfully strong. That's the, so if you're, but if we're not brave enough, and we're going to be attacked and abused, and we'll lose our mind, we've got to be careful. It's a very amazing level of practice. So that Atisha kept this ugly cook, because he, every time he was mean to him and didn't do what he wanted, because the attachment is so primordial. Attachment is the junkie in us that only wants everything to be lovely. So the second anybody doesn't make it lovely for you, that's an opportunity to eat it up for breakfast and be grateful, because you just purified your attachment. You just purified your anger. So it's a quite advanced level. We've got to know where we're at.
All right. Thank you.
Get my point?
Yeah. Thanks.
Good, Karen. We can try it once a month, honey.
All right.
You understand? So it's, but this is the thing we don't often realize, I think, with spiritual practice. There are levels of capability, and all this is cognitive therapy. Buddha's a cognitive therapist. It's all a question of what you're capable of. You've got to know your capability, you know. You can try, you can make effort, but you've got to know what you're capable of. So important. Yes, Sheila. Hello, sweetheart.
So thank you, Venerable. This is really so helpful, and I really appreciate it. But not that I'm at this level at all, but ultimately, is all this attachment about the I, holding on to this inherent I, is that kind of where the final goal of
Okay,
getting rid of
so
attachment?
the three main delusions. The root delusion is clinging to the most primordial, clinging to this separate, inherent, solid, concrete I. That's the deepest delusion. Its main voice is attachment to get what that I wants. And then aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. They're the three poisons. So the very first level, you control the body and speech. Then you control the attachment and the aversion. And then eventually, when you get to the most advanced levels, you start to realize emptiness, and that cuts the root delusion. So it's levels and levels of practice. That's the final wisdom to get when you realized emptiness and you've perfected and you've cut the root altogether. There's no longer the sense of a separate I. So it's one step at a time. First, you control the servants of the attachment, then you control the attachment and the anger, then you get to the root delusion. And that's when you realize emptiness. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Good, good, good. Okay. That's the wisdom wing. And then, of course, you mix that with the compassion wing, where you practice patience and humility and generosity and forgiveness and, transforming problems and all the rest. So bodhicitta and wisdom together, that's Buddha. What else, people? Anything else to bring up? Any old thing? Yes, Birgit, talk to me.
Hi, Venerable Robina. Thank you so much.
Oh, this is Teresa. Okay, Teresa,
Yeah.
good job. Talk to
Can
me.
you hear me okay?
I do.
Okay, great. My question is back what you were talking about earlier when you said we only have positive states of mind and negative states of mind, and it made me question if we have neutral states of mind. Because I know we have neutral feelings.
Yeah, that's the third. Okay, put it this way. There are but there's three categories. I mean, three categories of states of mind. And the way I like to put it in general, you've got the negative, deluded, neurotic, ridiculous ones. You've got the valid, reasonable, virtuous ones like love and compassion and kindness and generosity and forgiveness. And then you have, I call them the mechanics of the mind, like intention, attention, concentration, memory. All these are like the parts of your mind that enable you to function. Like a murderer and a meditator both need good concentration. So if you like, they've got a neutral characteristic. But at more sophisticated levels, there are states of being that are neutral, that are neither negative nor positive. Yes, for sure. That's exactly right. But in our ordinary daily life, the ones that are neutral are these that are neither negative nor positive, meaning concentration, intention, attention, and they're very important. So that's why I'll call them the mechanics of the mind. Do you understand?
Yeah, thank you.
But there are more subtle levels of being where you can just say you've got a neutral state of mind that's neither negative nor positive. But in most of our daily life, we don't have many of them, except for the mechanics. You understand my point, Teresa?
What would be an example of one that is a neutral state of mind besides the mechanics, if we were to think of it that level?
Literally, it would be not when your mind is really quiet and it's neither negative nor positive. I would say it's something like that. There are rebirths where they say, well, you've just got a neutral mind, when the mind is so subtle, it's just neutral. There's neither negative nor positive there. But in most of our daily lives, I would suggest almost all the time, it's either going to be attachment. It might be very mild attachment. It might be fairly steady, but there's still going to be some ink, as long as you've got ego grasping there. Ego grasping's there all the time to realize emptiness. But I'd say it's more when the emotions aren't berserk, maybe you'd say that's more like a neutral state. You could say like that.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're working towards.
Not really. No, that's kind of can be almost considered to be indifferent. No, not at all. We're working towards the virtues, sweetheart.
Oh, yeah.
You see my point?
Right.
Working towards the virtues. That's the really powerful one. At the beginning stages, we're trying to control the negative. And so, yes, have equanimity in yourself. That's important. But eventually we want to grow the virtues until they are really powerful. Do you understand?
Yes.
It's important to remember. Okay, good. Yes, people. Anything else? I think, yes. Who was there? Where were you? Birgit, yes, darling, talk to me.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for the teaching. It's very inspiring and very helpful. Something that would interest me, what is the Buddhist take on performance anxiety? And do you have suggestions?
I hear you. That's interesting. So I hear you. Yeah. So give me an example of a scenario in which this would occur for you, Birgit.
I mean, for me personally, it's I'm a musician. So,
okay. Understand.
So it's actually the playing for people, but yes. I think it goes beyond that. If you think of situations like job interviews,
that's right, exactly.
Public speaking.
There you go.
Anything where you're personally exposed.
Yes, exactly.
And of course, you want to do well.
That's right.
And then there's anxiety that you have to
really. This is a minefield. So let's just do a really clear analysis, okay? I mean, it's like okay. In the Buddha's view, like I've been saying, we've got these neurotic. They're kind of like I-based. So this fundamental view in Buddhism, we've got this root neurotic state of mind that's very primordial. And even in ordinary Western psychology, we take this as a given. It's not seen as a problem, but we've got this primordially deep, and it's fear-based, but it's often just hidden. We don't notice it. It's a fear-based sense of a very separate, concrete I. It's very subtle. Its main voice in day-to-day life is this attachment to get what that I wants. And that's like a junkie within us. And it's multifaceted, Birgit. It's usually the energy of attachment, first of all, is like dissatisfaction. It's kind of always wanting something more. It's I'm never enough. It's I don't have enough. It can be very strong like that. It can be attachment to food, attachment to the boyfriend, attachment to the more subtle level. And this is what we're getting to now. The more subtle level, like I've been talking before, is attachment to being seen as a good girl. So that's the one that is so pervasive for all of us. And that would be the one that's at play when you got to go. I'm suddenly, okay, no, there's more to it. There's more to it. There's also other states of mind when attachment doesn't get what it wants. There's aversion, anger. And that could be very mild in somebody, like frustration, annoyance. In other people, it can be very volatile. But we've also got other states of mind, the negative ones, the neurotic ones, the ones that cause us suffering. There could be arrogance, like an overdeveloped sense of your importance, or there could be low self-esteem, and an overdeveloped sense of you're not being good enough. So there's all these little kind of pieces all playing hand in hand together. And then you see if the one of like, say, then you got, maybe you have a person who is not so arrogant, but is quite shy. So it's a very common one for shy, so-called shy people to have this, what you're talking about. Now you look to me not like a very volatile person. Maybe you're more shy type person. And it's like you're like a deer in the headlights when you suddenly have to be up there. And that often though is still related. In other words, shyness or self-consciousness is another type of, one person's got arrogance and they're very conscious of how they're being seen by others, but so is a shy person. They're very conscious of their being seen by others. One looks very quiet and mousy, one looks very big and loud, but they're both a similar symptom. And it's this having a separate, this self-conscious feeling of being this me who has to prove myself. I mean, it's all very subtle, you know, it's all very subtle. So it's to do with attachment to being a good girl, attachment to get, I mean, wanting to do well is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. That can be a virtuous state of mind. But when it's mixed with this attachment, which it's all quite subtle, Birgit, you know, and we have to look into our own minds very deeply. I mean, a person who doesn't have any anxiety, who has no performance anxiety, but might be really arrogant and they kind of be, and they can do beautifully. But I mean, you hear so many people who get like, you know, get such shock when they have to perform. And it's related to attachment. You could argue that when we're finally really advanced and we've given up attachment, given up anger, you'd be completely content whatever you did. You wouldn't have this anxiety. It's quite subtle, but it's related to attachment. I mean, it sounds kind of, it's a very broad word in Buddhism, but it's got many functions, you know. But I mean, do you have techniques for getting over it? Do you have techniques yourself for overcoming it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the first, of course, is to be prepared.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
You know, with whatever you're doing.
There you go. That's right.
And that's really the first thing. And but then it's how to deal with what's left anyway. You know, where sometimes it seems to me. I mean, everybody who goes out there and performs, or most people, experience some point of some kind of anxiety.
Yes, exactly.
And they say the thing is to make it work for you rather than against you. There are a couple things like before you perform to take good care of yourself.
Absolutely, or very sensible. But another thing I think is interesting, if it's possible, you know, yourself, let's say I'm in an audience and I can see that you're giving a talk and suddenly I can see you're nervous. If you can really realize that everybody in that audience is dying for you to be successful, So if you can really have a feeling, perhaps really knowing these people want you to be successful, and so you want to make them happy in the best way. And
Right.
I mean, that's a kind of a curious one, but it's true. You know yourself, if you see someone else who's nervous, you hope they get over it. You wish they would just be really successful. So you feel the connection with the audience and really want to make them happy, you know, want to make them happy. I mean, that's something else as well, but being prepared is absolutely very necessary. Sometimes we wing things, you know. But it's so true. But I think the feeling, the other one, I think what I'm talking about also is some empathy. Don't have this feeling of being so separate from this big group of people. Try and feel the human connection. I mean, because everybody who is successful, like actors or musicians, when that works, you all know how powerful it is because you feel that connection from the audience. So try to have that from the beginning. Try to want to make them happy and feel an empathy with people. Don't fit, because all the delusions are a symptom of being separate, you know. Do you understand?
I mean, that's really what you're just saying. That's really the great thing of a good performance, when you feel that everybody's in this together.
That's exactly right. So try and really cultivate that wish from the beginning, I think, because the anxiety comes from the separate self. All our worries and fears come from the separate self. Anger comes from that. Attachment comes from that. And they're very primordial. But to try and cultivate that real wish of being oneness with the group, and even to start in a friendly way somehow to cut the ice, you know?
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Thank you. People, come on. What else, darlings? Anything else?
Venerable, there's a comment in the chat.
Good.
So let me read it. While we care so much about what people think of us, aren't we also raised to believe that this is important, that we're obligated to care? If we decide we don't care about what people think, it's shocking. And then there's a question. What about holidays with no family or plans? And everyone's asking about what...
Sunny, can you wait?
Yes.
In that first question, is the second part of the same person?
No.
Okay, well, you please give me one at a time. I'll do the first one first. It's a really good point. And the thing that we have to understand, if we take the Buddhist view of the mind, we've got lots of states of mind that are neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, the cause of our pain and the cause of why we harm others. But then you have the positive states of mind. So when we say things like learn to be brave enough to know really what you want and to follow that, that's talking from the wisdom point of view. The neurotic side of us that's fearful of upsetting people, but we think it's being a good girl. We think I'm doing what mummy said to try and make other people happy. But if we haven't worked on our attachment, which is in this case attachment to being seen as a good girl, then it's a mess, it's a disaster, and that's what holds us back. So the problem isn't wanting to make people happy. This is marvelous quality. That's what compassion is. But if it's mixed with attachment to being seen as a good girl, it becomes all messed up. That's the big problem. I'm afraid of not, like say, you know, you're terrified of being you're terrified of being criticized by somebody, and then you think, oh, you're doing it to make them happy. That's all twisted. We've got to really look inside. So of course, the wish to make people happy is compassion. It is absolutely amazing. We must have that, but it's got to be wise. It's got to have wisdom, and wisdom comes from knowing our own mind well and not doing it polluted by attachment. This is really tough, but this is the answer, you know. It's very hard to distinguish the difference. And the other thing is, let's say you got a mummy, let's say your darling mummy's a bit neurotic and needy and possessive and is always complaining that you don't love her. This is a very common story, right? So on the one hand, you want to make your mother happy. You want to do anything to make your mummy happy. But also it's mixed with this attachment, this fear of being a naughty girl, this fear of wanting to be seen to be a good girl, and that will make you absolutely exhausted. And then when you walk away, you've just given your mother 5 hours and she still complains and still thinks you don't love her. You will feel you're completely failed, but you haven't failed. So in other words, you should want to make people happy, but they are the ones who need to become happy. You can't force a person to be happy. So you might love your mother, give her everything she wants, but she's still moaning and complaining. That does not mean you did a bad job. You did a good job. But we tend to judge whether we did a good job by the fact that the person looks like they're happy. You can't force a person to be happy. It's up to them to be happy. So we can do what we can, but have no expectations that they're going to get happy. You can't, you go crazy otherwise. So there's two different things I'm saying here. I hope it's clear. What's the other question, Sonny?
Okay, what about holidays with no family or plans and everyone asking about what you are doing?
And so what's the answer though? No plans, you mean? You're not going anywhere. That's the assumption, is it? Unmute yourself, Sonny.
It's from a person who says they have no plans to go anywhere and everyone keeps asking, what are you doing?
You say, I'm going to be staying at home and I'm going to watch Netflix and put my feet up and have a lovely apple pie and be happy. But if there's a feeling of feeling inferior and lonely and people go, oh, you poor thing, you got no family, then that's something for you to look at. Because if you've got no family and you're not going anywhere, and you don't want to go anywhere, then you try to be content with it. But on the other hand, if you do feel lonely and you do want to go somewhere, maybe you go to, I don't know, see if you can find, must be groups of people who meet who don't have family. Maybe there are restaurants you can go and have a lunch with or something. But I think if you haven't got family and haven't got any plans, try and be happy with that. Be happy with that and tell people with a happy mind, I'm staying at home and I'm going to relax. But if you feel sad about it, that's another discussion, isn't it? That's another discussion. That's dissatisfaction. Yeah. Or maybe find other people who've got no other plans and all go to something together. I don't know. I'm just joking now, but I'm not joking also. But if you want to ask me more from that, say more things, I'm more than happy to discuss it. I've got no plans. No, sure, I'll be in Europe. That's not true. I'll be in Europe. So what I've got plans, I suppose, I'll be in Europe. Whoever's there on the day, I'll be with them. So whatever it is. Christmas, I'll be in France for Christmas. Usually I have Christmas with my family in Australia, but it's probably 20 years since I've had Christmas with my family. Yeah, anyway, whatever. Thanksgiving's a big one in America, isn't it? Hey, what else, darlings? Any questions? Anybody else? Questions, things to bring up? Problems? What else is there, darlings? Yes, Eileen, talk to me.
Question, oh, that's okay. Yes, I'm doing a lot of reading right now. Here's my question. I don't know if this relates to what we're talking about, but the whole idea that talking about emptiness, right? That we don't see things the way they are.
Right.
Right. So my question is, and I'm not expecting you to answer it, but I'm just thinking, so what would we see?
I understand. I know it's very curious. It's a good question. And it seems mysterious to us, isn't it? But I think forget about even the subtler delusion that sees everything as intrinsic, Eileen. Let's look at the branch delusions. So that would mean let's look at how attachment doesn't see things the way things are. Let's look at how anger causes us not to be in sync with reality. These are ones we can understand.
Yes.
So think of it like this. Okay. I mean, so right now when there's attachment, let's say to chocolate cake, give a simple example, Eileen. The thing is, attachment's function is to over-exaggerate the deliciousness. So then the cake, so first of all, what's going on inside is important. There's a feeling of dissatisfaction. That's the energy of attachment. Attachment is needy and hungry, emotionally hungry. And then there's all this expectation and all this builds up. And then by the time the cake is there and you're seeing the cake through this energy of anxiety and neediness and expectation and emotional hunger, attachment makes it look incredibly delicious and you're dying to get it in the mouth, So there's all this expectation there's irritation and there's kind of anxiety inside, because you feel like the energy of attachment is you feel separate from it, you feel lonely, and the more you feel hungry, emotional hunger is attachment, the more the cake will look delicious, and the more you hungrily want to connect with it. Look at it as with people, our beloved boyfriend, our children, we are so attached to. Look at the anxiety and the drama and the possessiveness and the fears. So what would it be like if you didn't have attachment? Well, I'll tell you, you'd see the cake, you'd be very content in yourself, you'd be fulfilled. The function of giving up attachment is you're very joyful, you're very fulfilled. There's no hunger, there's no emotional hunger, there's no neediness, there's no dissatisfaction, there's joyful, you're content, fulfilled, and you'd also be the cake will also look delicious, but you won't be fooled by it. You don't be kind of dragged by it. You see it. I mean, there's nothing cosmic. It would look delicious, but you would have none of that misery inside, none of that expectation, none of that possessiveness, none of that neediness, none of that disappointment if somebody else gets it. All of that drama would be gone, and you'd be joyful and fulfilled and content, and you'd be loving and kind, and you'd happily give it to somebody else.
Yes,
And you'd be
yes.
so. That's really the way to think of it that way. It's not mystical. So when you've just also got rid of the root delusion, you'd even be more content, more joyful, more blissful, and nothing would disturb you, and nothing would be, and you'd see things as they are, which means there's no dramas. You've taken away all the fantasies, in other words. And you would just, if there's a delicious cake, there'll be a delicious cake,
Right.
But it's hard, but all the emotional junk is gone. That's what's missing. That's what's different. Is that helpful?
It's so much so. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So, Michelle, you had something to say, darling. Michelle, talk to me.
No, really, I was just thinking about the person who was talking about Thanksgiving, and I was just wanted to, I don't know if it was even appropriate,
Say it, come on. Good, say something.
but I was married. I was married for 30 years, and my husband had just walked out with a younger woman with,
Such a classic
just one of those
story,
really
Michelle.
glamorous. It was one of those, with one of those really glamorous people. Really, with everything very well. It was just really sad. And and I didn't have a date for New Year's Eve. He just walked out in September, and there I am on New Year's Eve, and I didn't have a date. And I was thinking, well, this could be pretty dreadful. And I said, oh no, this is my own story.
Uh-huh.
I'm in my own movie, and I'm going to have a really good time.
There you go.
And I got into my really cozy pajamas, and I set up my Netflix, and I ordered in sushi, and I said, this is like my movie, and it's pretty awesome.
There you go, darling.
And I really felt okay. I mean,
that's right.
And it really was flipping. It was like flipping the channel, that this was really going to be okay, and I really had a good time. And I don't know if that's worth anything, but I really wanted to share that with that other person.
No, that's perfect, Michelle. And in a way, it's exactly the point. That the point is, what you realized was you could change the script in your head. And so that's really what I'm saying. If we can see this, we can really decide it is totally fine to be with myself. It is totally, and to make the most of it. Because the trouble is with our attachment, we always feel we define ourselves by other people. That's what you do for 30 years in a relationship. So it's a big shift to learn to really be content with our own presence, really be content with our own thoughts, and really be content and make it as nice as you can, not sitting there looking miserable. No, it's very powerful. It's very wonderful, Michelle. So thank you for telling us that. Well done. Well done, girl. This is the function of attachment. Attachment, this is what's fascinating about attachment. Attachment assumes that I am not enough. That's why, in our culture, the one of having a partner or not having a partner is so enormous. When you don't have a partner and you have this feeling of loneliness, the assumption is the world is full of all these happy partners. I mean, excuse me, come on, what a joke. But even so, really the assumption of attachment is that I'm half a person and I've got to have another half a person to make me valid. That's the deepest attachment of all. That's the one of the attachment to being seen as a nice girl. It's very primordial in all of us, you know. So it really takes courage to work on it. So then when you are content with yourself, it doesn't mean you're not you can have 100 friends, but if you're with your 100 friends, you're happy. On your own, you're happy. It's not as if being on your own is like a second choice. And more, I think these days people are choosing it. So it's a really good sign, you know. But it's being content with who we are, that we are not validated because someone else says, Robina, you're a nice person. But that's how deeply this attachment works, you know. And especially if you've been in a relationship for 30 years, it's your old habit, isn't it? So thank you very much, Michelle. It was very nice what you said. And the other one about loneliness now, this is another discussion, no one's saying this one, but when we're sad and lonely, which means we've got no one to listen to our thoughts, but you've got to ask yourself, this is the same point, ask yourself the question, what is wrong with my thoughts that if I have them on my own? What makes them suddenly valid because somebody else hears them? You've got to ask that question of yourself. It's quite profound. But the other one is, one of the tendencies we can have when we're lonely is to kind of feel, well, no one loves me. There's no one who's going to do anything for me. You sit there feeling very hopeless and you're waiting for someone else to come along and be kind to you. You're waiting for someone else to come and do something for you. But that's where we can make a conscious effort to shift it, to think, what can I do for others? You know, what can I do? So have a feeling of being proactive and going out there, and maybe go to one of the homeless places, go to a place for animals and offer your service to help others on that day. That would be profound, you know. Instead of thinking who's going to make me happy, it sounds like goody-goody, but it's quite profound, because we all know when we are sharing ourselves with other people, this is brings so much joy to us, you know. So don't just wait around, go out there. And especially if you're living in a big city, there'll be so many places you could go to offer your service, to volunteer, to take care of people, volunteer to go to some place to serve meals. You know, I mean, it's profound. And that will immediately stop loneliness. There's no question about that. Time to finish nearly. Sunny, Sheila. So when is but Thanksgiving's not a while. It's another 10 days for Thanksgiving, isn't it? Do you do anything at the center, Sheila? Do you have any events at the center for these things for Thanksgiving or Christmas? No.
Actually, the center's still closed.
Oh, are you really? You're still closed in New York? Oh,
yeah, we'll probably open in the
I
spring.
didn't realize.
Before you come.
Until when will be closed?
Until you come.
Oh,
you're the first scheduled in-house teaching at the moment.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to come, and I'm coming back in March. Maybe I'll come for we'll see. We'll work something out. No, they're all opening up in Europe. It's interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, darling people. So look, it's nearly time to go. So just keep moving, people. Keep remembering. This is the thing that I found from when I first listened to the teachings. You know, there I was, typical person with all my misery and my anger and my dramas. But the thing that really began to encourage me was this knowing this approach in Buddhism that says that we've got so much potential. We don't hear that. I don't think we hear that in our modern psychology. We don't talk like that. We can talk about how the brain can change and all this, but to have this fundamental view that you've got so much potential for contentment and clarity and joy and love and compassion, not some fantasy, not just cross your fingers and hope for the best. It's a proper, doable job that every one of us can do. And it's hard work. It's having your hands in your own SHIT, as a friend of mine, a therapist and a Buddhist said. So it's a hard job, but it's doable, and you have this goal you have this light at the end of the tunnel, so you're looking forward to that. And then no, you're not waiting for some perfect time to suddenly snap into place overnight. It's a gradual step-by-step process. So every day check up on your progress, rejoice in what you're doing, be happy with what your effort is, delight in your good qualities, and then the more you delight in your good qualities and in your potential, the more you're able to see your rubbish and own it. You know, if you never praise yourself, if you never see your good qualities, it's very painful to take responsibility for your rubbish, you know. This is really important. So, darling people, yes, Karen, talk to me.
You with this at the end. What, can you hear me? What do
Yes,
I do about a nephew who's coming from Holland to visit and he's not vaccinated? He refuses to get vaccinated. And
Yes.
it's like causing a rift
He will
with,
get it, but they will allow him into the country, will they? I thought we had to be vaccinated to get into the country.
I think if he takes a COVID test,
Oh, I
that's
see.
in New York City.
So he's coming to your home or to the
Yeah.
to family events. Well, honey child, you've got to make decisions. You've got to
Yeah.
make a decision.
I've got to research it, I guess.
I would guess, but you've got to make a decision, and a wise decision, whatever you think is the best thing. And I mean, you've got to, whether it's going to be the tough choice, but that's, you can't be compromised. You've got to know, lots of people don't want to be vaccinated. That's their call. Lots of people want it. So you've got to be clear, Karen, and be prepared to upset him if you feel you can't have him in the home. You've got to decide, darling. You've got to really make a decision there and do it with the best motivation. And he's got to learn to live with it, whatever it is. I mean, if he knows that everybody expects it, it's rather arrogant. I mean, I know I can't criticize anybody. I can't. I know it's very it's very controversial. I know that.
He's only 20. He's 19 or 20. And
okay. So you
I
think
guess
it's out of laziness that he hasn't done it, or what?
he doesn't believe in getting vaccinated.
Okay, there you go. Well, then if that's the case, he's got to know that the other side of the coin is that he can't go places. I mean, in New York, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize, but I'm in Santa Fe, nobody asks to see my vaccinations. Every single place I went in New York, every cafe, everything I had to show my vaccinations. So I don't know how he's going to survive. Frankly,
I think maybe he shouldn't come. That's what I think.
I think for his, where's he supposed to come to? New York? Is it New York he's coming to?
Yeah.
Well, honey child, he can't go in any place. I didn't even know this. Luckily, I had my vaccination card. Every single cafe, every little tiny place insisted on seeing my vaccination. They didn't care if I had COVID. They wanted to see my vaccination. So if he comes to New York, he's going to be naive. No one will let him in anywhere. He's being a bit childish. He's better be warned, I'd say.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
He's got to just know what's involved. He can be arrogant. He can decide he doesn't want, that's his choice, but there's going to be the flip side. It's going to be, and more these days, you can't, I mean, okay, it depends on what state you live in. I know in Texas, whatever. Anyway, I think you've got to be very clear with him. Otherwise you're going to be very disappointed.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're going.
Okay.
Well, dearest people, I'm so happy to see you all, and I'm sure I'll see you all again soon. Somewhere.
Thank
Keep
you
moving.
very much.
Keep going. Good. Keep going, Sheila. Keep going with the center. Keep going, Eileen, Sunny, everybody. All right.
Thank you.
Never
Thank
give
you.
up. Never give up. Never give up.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabina, always.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Venerable
So
Robina.
helpful.
Thank you.
Bye, sweetheart.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao all.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila and
Happy
Sunny, for all of this.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
yes.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.